Good evening and welcome to the January 23rd special board meeting. We're glad you're here. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item here is our land acknowledgement. Sullivan Taylor, do you have that?
Evergreen Public Schools resides on the traditional lands of the Chinookan peoples and the Cowlitz tribe. They have lived on and cared for this land and its waterways since time immemorial. We thank them for their stewardship and make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community.
Thank you. Before you have tonight's agenda and an opportunity to adopt the agenda, action requires a motion.
I move that we adopt this evening's agenda as presented.
A second?
Director Bocanegra moves and Director Wilson seconds to adopt the agenda. Any comments? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Next item on our agenda is the School Board Recognition Month. John?
Yeah, last time I read a little something to honor our school board, and we had intended to put a video together like we typically do, and then a snowmageddon hit. So we didn't have an opportunity. So instead, what we did is we put together our superintendent's leadership team, the folks there all chipped in. We got these kind of eclectic bags for you, some goodies that you can hunker down on a cold night and enjoy. And but we all just really appreciate our board and all that you do and all the hours and time you put in to support and serve our students. Our student board reps are amazing, constantly trying to make us better than continually better. And so we just appreciate you. Thank you, and we want you to know that that you all are appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the gesture.
Thank you.
And including the students on our board. I really appreciate their presence too. I neglected to mention that we have Ginny Gronwald. Director Gronwald isn't here today, and I'd be happy to take a motion to excuse her.
I move to excuse Ginny Gronwald from the meeting this evening.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is for community members who wish to speak to the board. Any community member wishing to address the board may do so during the designated time on the agenda for public comments. Comments are to be directed to the board of directors as a whole and may not be addressed to any individual member of the board, the administrative staff, or the audience. Although the board will not engage in dialogue, the board chair may ask a speaker a clarifying question or follow up at a later time on an issue raised during public comment. Reminders: each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes. There is no mechanism whereby a speaker can donate some or all of their time to another speaker. No individual may speak more than once per regular meeting, even if there is time remaining. Please state your name and district affiliation, if any. Our first speaker on the list is Stephen Houston. Stephen, are you here? Hi.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity. Again, my name's Steve Houston, and I've spoken to you before. I want you to keep in mind this statement that my fellow employee once told me: no job is too hard for those that don't have to do the work. Just keep that in mind there. So far during this school year, I've been continuing my volunteer effort in elementary and middle schools. I've been volunteering at second grade level for about an hour a week, helping kids with math and reading. And then most of my time is at 4 times weekly in the 8th grade math classes, about an hour per day over at Y East. In 2023, when I was volunteering. Towards the end of the academic year, I was asked to assist several 6th grade students who wanted to take a test so they could skip 7th grade and go into 8th grade math. And so, as it turns out, I was also in a 7th grade class, so I was kind of familiar with what they were talking about. But I went and contacted a senior math teacher who gave me a printout of the 7th grade standards. I know you can't see this, okay? But it's a big laundry list of what they have to have and all this. And I was looking through this and going, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we've covered this in this class, you know, number systems, expressions, blah, blah, blah. But towards the end, I looked at it and says, yes, they're going to do some probability and statistics, which I think is a very, very good thing to do. However, when at the time, it was about the end of May, and I looked at where the 7th grade class that I was working with and seeing how much time that was left, I said, there's no way they're going to get to this. They need more time to get this stuff into them. So with all that's being asked, that as one example, with all that's being asked to teach students now, as well as all the time that's required for state testing and iReadies and all this, and some people may not like this, I'm sorry, but I think you need to extend the school year closer to the 4th of July holiday. You need more time to get all this information into the school. And students may not agree with that either, but there's so much more that they have to know in order to get by nowadays. The second item I'm saying wanted to do this is talk to the school board, but I think you need to do something in conjunction with Camas, Washougal, Vancouver, and I bet Olympia and Seattle have the same problem, that and to go to the Washington legislature and insist they pony up some more money for you to do the jobs you have to do. There's more money to get more personnel, more time for things. It's just not, from what I see, it's just not adequate to do it. It says in the state's constitution, the paramount duty of the state is to make ample provision for education. In the paper just a couple days ago, yes, it's the Washougal schools, where would you make cuts? And the finance director says, quote, we are underfunded for special education. The state does not adequately fund basic education. You probably already know that, but I think you should go, oops, 3 seconds, try to go and force or cajole them to get more money for this. That's basically all I have, so, and I ran out of time, so thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The next speaker on the list is Shannon Shambaugh. If I pronounce the name incorrectly, please correct me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Boyd. My name is Shannon Shambaugh, and I'm the equity coach for Evergreen Public Schools and a member of EEA. I've been worked for the district this is my 21st year. And during the last school board meeting, our student board representatives, Covenant and Sullivan, spoke up about the importance of retaining diverse teachers in the next round of budget cuts. Sullivan shared that although she's a senior, she's only had 2 teachers of color in her 12 years of schooling. This unfortunately makes sense given that EPS currently has a staff that is 88% white, while the student body is made up of 50% students of color. Sullivan requested that staff diversity be a priority when considering budget cuts this year. I'm here to back up Sullivan and Covenant's request with research on the importance of retaining staff of color. I left you with 4 pages of research. I'm just going to highlight a few things. Schools with larger numbers of Black and Hispanic teachers have greater representation of Black and Hispanic students in gifted programs. Exposure to just one same-race teacher during elementary school reduces the school dropout rate for economically disadvantaged Black male students by a whopping 39%. In classrooms where students share racial characteristics with their teachers, they report a greater level of happiness in class, feeling cared for and motivated by their teacher, and the quality of student-teacher communication is increased. They also report putting forth more personal effort and have higher college aspirations. Assignment to a same-race teacher significantly impacts students' reading and math assessments in grades 3 through 10. And finally, students are 36% more likely to be perceived as disruptive, and 33% more likely to be perceived as inattentive when the teacher does not share the student's race and ethnicity. Given these statistics, I would hope the ethical priority for EPS and EEA would be to keep teachers of color in classrooms with students of color. Retaining diverse staff is a multi-pronged effort. that must include language in the collective bargaining agreement that reduces the longstanding systemic inequity that the blanket last in, first out policies have perpetuated. The policies uphold a power dynamic that consistently leads to teachers of color being reduced at higher rates than white teachers. I also know that if we have the collective desire and will, we can make this happen, because both Seattle Public Schools and Portland Public Schools have language in their collective bargaining agreements that help protect teachers of color during budget cuts. At the Union Rep Council meeting last night, union leadership spoke up against the idea, yet again, of adding language to the contract to retain staff of color. And this left me deep in my feelings about how often folks of color have been told it's just not the right time yet in the face of glaring systemic inequity. At some point, we need to stop hiding behind systems, policies, and business as usual. We must pay attention to the research and prioritize our students, because that's who we're here for. Our goal must be to build enough collective will to break down the systemic barrier. I'll leave you with a quote from the author of Courageous Conversations About Race, Glenn Singleton. "Who is setting the schedule for achieving racial proportionality and balance? Real racial gains are painstakingly slow in our schools. Support for incremental change is a major reason for the permanence of systemic white supremacy. While people of color and indigenous people are urged to be patient by those in power, access to opportunity, excellence, and leadership remain the property of whiteness, no matter how much progress has been made."
Thank you, Shannon. The next person signed up to speak is Clarissa Hightower. Clarissa, are you here? Hi.
Well, hello. How are we doing this evening? I'm super excited to be here with you all. I actually just came to do some encouraging for you all. A little bit of fussing, because I like to fuss, but I fuss and care. But it's to encourage you all. And I want to make sure I get all of my points for encouraging, so I am going to look down up some notes. But I am here to encourage you all to lean into your, the commitment that you have to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I have a sneaky suspicion that there's going to be multiple opportunities for you in the coming months to do that. And so I encourage you to show out a little bit for the community, because we are here to support you in these efforts. There are thousands of us who are waiting to back you in the showing out for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our district, because you know and we know how vital it is to our success. I encourage you to be courageous on behalf of our students, staff, and families, and don't be deceived by some of the unfortunate closed-mindedness and hatred of difference, performative diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, or a perversion of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Continue to be encouraged and ask the right questions to get to the root of why certain things are proposed to you and put in front of you. I want you to be encouraged to remember that our community's strength lies in our diversity. It is how we are able to iterate towards the excellence that our strategic plan lays out. It provides opportunities for us to innovate for our students. We cannot keep doing the same old things for a brand new generation. They are calling for us to do something different. So I encourage you to answer their call. I'm here with you to do that. I encourage you to heed the words of our students. Again, our student reps spoke boldly about the importance of retaining our diverse staff. So I encourage you to heed their words. I also encourage you to hold yourselves and others who have decision-making power accountable to putting action behind the words that they say that are in support of the core values of our district. And I'm going to reiterate that I'm speaking and encouraging you from a place of care, because I care for you, and for your humanity, and for the humanity of every person in our district, not just people who agree with me, every single person, because that is what gives our community its power, those diverse perspectives, and how we honor and reflect those and how we support. The end.
Thank you, Clarissa. This concludes the public comments portion of the meeting. Thank you for speaking, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the board consent agenda, consisting of minutes from the last three meetings that were noticed to the public. Action requires a motion.
I move to approve the board consent agenda.
Seconded.
Have you got that, Lori? Okay. Motion to approve the board consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So the vote is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's consent agenda, which has a lot of stuff in it. Could I have a motion to approve that?
I motion that we approve the superintendent consent agenda as presented.
Second?
It was Weatherspoon and Wilson. All in favor of approving the superintendent consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Again, unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is matters reserved for board action. Is Janae Gomes here to present on that?
Yeah, and while Janae's coming up, Chief Operating Officer Janae Gomes is going to come up and share our first reading. We had this at workshop, so you should be familiar with it. And she's also going to touch on how we're thinking about the additional days that we're going to need to make up regarding snow days. So she'll touch on that. Still some things to work out, but go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you. Before you for first reading this evening is the calendar for 24-25. Just to highlight some context behind how we arrived here. We have coordinated with surrounding districts around a common spring break. We've made sure we're similar in our winter break. There could be some variance, but primarily it's the same. During our EEA bargain this year, one of the things we adjusted was one of the professional development days that is in August. We moved that to January, so you'll see that in yellow. And we worked with our teaching and learning team, and they selected the day for that professional development. We worked with our special education team for the day in August that they work with all of their employees. And then we also put together a committee that had a representative from all of the unions that we initially had 3 calendars we looked at. The committee narrowed it down to 2. And then we sent them out to the all user for a vote for people to look at both calendars. The responses, we had almost 1,700 responses. 62% voted for this calendar and about 38% for the other one. So that is what is before you today. Any questions on it?
Just to remind us, what were the percentages? Wasn't it 60% for calendar B?
62 for this one and 38 for the other option.
And I see that one of the differences there from past years is that school will begin on the Tuesday, the 26th, rather than a Wednesday.
Yes, that is correct. And the reason why is based on the snow days and what that looks like. You know, if we did have snow days, then it would roll into that following week. And so we tried to make some adjustments in order to account for that. The last day would also be an early release day. It falls on that Wednesday.
Any other questions for Janae?
Okay. In regards to the current calendar, the 23-24, so you have initially, approved that calendar. We had had a revision after the strike this year. And since then, we've experienced the 4 snow days. So it's really pushed out days. So there was some communications that had occurred regarding semesters and trimesters and adjusting those dates, and all of that was sent out today. We're also having some initial conversations regarding the last day of school and what that is going to look like. So we don't have a answer yet because we're working through some of that. We've had some preliminary conversations with our Evergreen Education Association. We still need to reach out with PSE and have our conversations with them. But our purpose in that is what we're trying to do is explore a waiver with the state that would be under the emergency waiver that falls under the storm section for the ice and snowstorm. And there's quite a few steps that have to occur with that. But part of our conversations with PSE is we wanted to ensure that we keep everybody whole. So that's what we would talk with them about if we were able to obtain the waiver. And with EEA, we've just broached the initial conversations. We would still have to continue those conversations because we do have a minimum amount of instructional minutes that we have to meet. And so we would have some adjustments around that. And the waiver would allow us to not have to meet the 180 days, but we still have to meet the instructional minutes minimum. Graduation is not changing, so those dates are staying the same. Regardless of what the end date is. I think there'll be some additional communications coming out about that because there is a rule around the seniors in 5 days, and that will come out at some point. I'm assuming from Superintendent Boyd or Director Fowler. And I'm just trying to make sure I covered all of the adjustments.
Can I ask a question about instructional minutes? So would those be made up on days that were considered half days, and they would become full days? Is that how we do it?
That could be an option, and what we had this before back in 17. At that point in time, not that it would be the same, but just use it as an example. We added minutes to every day, and then we just had to have an agreement around that. With semester dates getting pushed out, semester now is going to start on end on February 2nd, start on February 5th, and so we wouldn't recommend any changes prior to semester change. So we don't 100% know the last day of school yet because we're kind of working through some of that, which some is also out of our control, but we are at least exploring that. Anything I missed, Superintendent Boyd?
No, just to add to that, we'll be, of course, communicating. We've communicated that the semester and trimester date changes with our leaders. As soon as we get a little more clarity on these days, so as not to confuse people, we'll send out messaging to the entire community around the makeup days. We have some work to do with, as Janae said, with our EEA and our community a little bit to work some things out, and with OSPI. So we'll come back to you at the next meeting and keep you updated.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any discussion?
Do we need to make a motion to move this?
We sure do.
Okay. I move that we approve the calendar B as a first reading and move to a second reading at our next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion is to approve the calendar in this meeting and move it to the next meeting for a second reading at February 13th. Just inserting the date there. Is there any discussion? John, I did want to ask you, with respect to the last day of school, is the date not determined yet?
Well, it'll depend on whether or not we're able to obtain a waiver from the state.
Got
So it could be different depending on that. And we have not applied to the state for a waiver. We've had conversations with them, but we don't know yet. So that could change the date.
We've been in circumstances in the past with snow days where the seniors were graduated and then asked to come back to school to take their finals or whatever the last day of school activities were. Do we face a situation like that with the waiver if you obtain it?
There are some requirements for students to have a certain amount of days, and as we've lost some days, there'll be some messaging that will go out to seniors. They'll be able to graduate, but we have to work that out still.
And Sullivan Covenant, do you have any comments about this?
I have a comment. Good luck getting me to come back after I graduate. I'm kidding. Finals are very important, and if I had to do my finals again, I would 100% do that. I just hope we can get the state to approve this. I remember in 2017, I remember my mom telling me that school was going to start at something kind of funky. I was in elementary school. It started at like 9:37 or something kind of funky like that. And those extra minutes actually did add up in class. Having like that extra time, those 5 minutes can be the difference between having a really nice end to the day and having a not nice end to the day. And I hope that we get that approved, because I hope we don't have to move graduation. So
We
that's
won't,
my comment.
we won't move graduation. People have their itineraries set. People have travel arrangements. And so typically what happens is finals are taken, and then we invite seniors to come back afterwards. And we will do that as per the state requirements.
Thank you for talking about that, especially the advantages of those additional minutes. I appreciate that a lot. And I appreciate the work that everybody's been doing to plan a good recovery from the snow days, in the hopes that perhaps we'll be luckier as the year marches on here. Are there any other comments or discussion?
Let's just hope that we don't have any more storms.
Yep.
That might put us in a predicament.
With that, the motion is to move the proposed school calendar for next year forward for a second reading and approval at the February 13th board meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The vote is unanimous. And the next item on the agenda is our department update, teaching and learning.
Did you miss this superintendent report?
You know, I sure did. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent report to the board. John?
Right over me, Director Perkins.
I
That's
skipped over 2 items. I apologize.
You're fine. Thank you. Well, the first thing up on my list to talk about was snow days. And so those are 2 4-letter words we don't like to say in public education. And we just give people a sense of how it works. We have our transportation specialists when the weather is such that we're concerned there will be snow or ice. Our transportation specialists hit the roads about 4 in the morning, 3:30 or 4 in the morning. We're in contact with them and trying to determine if it's reasonable to put buses on the roads and to put people on the streets and the sidewalks. This ice event was really a rough one. It's our buses can drive over snow, even compacted snow, but ice is dangerous. And so we made the calls typically at night to have a 2-hour delay. Some of the days we were suspecting that we would not be able to go, but as weather is unpredictable, we have to preserve the chance especially given the strike. So we called the 2-hour delays, and with the hopes that we could run school. As it turned out, we weren't able to. So we really try to be thoughtful about the whole process. I'm in constant conversation with the surrounding superintendents. We're collaborating and working with our transportation and our grounds people to determine whether or not it's safe. And there was not a day in that among those 4 that it was safe. So the calls were good. And we'll continue to be thoughtful, and we'll hope for no more snow events, because you're right, it will challenge us if we have any more. So we're no more allowed, Mother Nature. I did want to. I want to speak to the diversification of the workforce a little bit, and I was planning to say something before the speakers, so I want to just let folks know I'm not doing this in response to the speakers, but. We do have in our theory of action, our strategic plan, our plan is red threaded with equity, and there's some language that compels us to organize around ensuring that our workforce, we put plans in place to diversify our workforce. It is unfortunate that it's fortunate that we continue to do a better job of hiring people of color, both in our PSE and our EEA. And it's also unfortunate that since they're the latest that we're hiring, it's a disproportionate impact. I also want to say that in the last 2 budget cuts, we've really worked hard to try to find a place for everybody when their positions have been cut. And so we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to pay attention. We'll continue to reach out to people. And when positions are cut, we have a big system. We cut about, we worked with about 4,000 different people that we provided some type of paycheck for. We have about 2,500 full-time employees. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of opportunity for people to retire or people to change situations, or for whatever reason they leave the system. We were able to find places for people. We can't promise that, but we're definitely will continue to work towards ensuring that people have an opportunity to have a position, and we share that information with folks as we're doing the budget reduction process. So I want to just express my commitment to that work and that it is codified in what we're trying to attempt in our strategic plan as well. I want to also speak to the budget forums. We had a couple of those. We had the in-person one canceled, but we were able to do 2 remote forums. We had somewhere north of 300 people participate, which is pretty good. We were not able to do the Spanish and Russian Ukrainian forums, so I've got meetings with some folks to see what we can do to loop back with those communities to make sure that we're doing a good job of interacting with our Spanish and Russian Ukrainian folks. So we'll continue to figure that out. I continue my school visits. I had a chance to visit Mountain View and Pacific, award some MVPs. Coincidentally, both at Mountain View and Pacific on the same day, both principals wanted me to award the Most Valuable Person Award to their students, their teachers in the SLP programs. It was really, really a beautiful thing to see how our teachers are supporting our most vulnerable students and how they're being recognized. At Pacific, we awarded it to the full team. And they were just absolutely delighted, and it was a beautiful thing to behold. So what a pleasure it is to see how our teachers are supporting our students with special needs. Day on the Hill coming up. Well, we'll be asking for that money. Our earlier speaker may get his wishes, both in terms of an extended year and in terms of us. We'll definitely be on the Hill advocating for resources and support for our students, and to make sure that they're doing their job and we're getting the support we need to have necessary resources. Just also reiterate board appreciation. Thank you for all you do, and that's all I have for my report.
John?
Yeah.
Are we going to reschedule the in-person budget engagement, or?
We probably will not reschedule the in-person meeting. We can talk at our board workshop. After our meeting, we'll have a board workshop, and if there's some ideas and thoughts about how we can engage. One of the things that we've thought about, Director Wilson, is maybe doing some engagement after we have our themes. So we have something new for our community to chew on. So we have some ideas about that and ideas about engaging with some other folks. So we can kick that around at the board workshop.
Yeah, it sounds like 300 people, that's a good,
Well,
input.
300 was pretty good for us, in any engagement. So, you always hope for more. You have 23,000 students and that many parents and families, but word does spread. We will send out after we have our board workshop today, and meet with our superintendent leadership team. We'll be sending out that video and the survey to all of the folks so that we get more engagement. Our students are going to we're in the control room today putting together a little video we send out to students. We'll continue to interact with our Evergreen Community Advisory Team and our Student Advisory Council to get input from them. So we'll keep trying to move forward and engage people and get the word out so that, 1, people aren't surprised, 2, they have a chance to at least express themselves, and then 3, we can use that information to help guide our thinking. And then, of course, we're committed to trying to get a feedback loop to people so they know how we're responding to their feedback.
Thank you, John. Any other questions for John? Hearing none. Move to the next item on the agenda, in which I extend another apology because the next item is the student board representative's update to the board. Let's see. Who goes first?
Hello, everybody. As a student, I believe it's crucial for students to have a voice in our district. Student input is valuable as it allows us to actively participate in district decision making. One of the effective ways we can contribute is by completing the upcoming budget reduction survey that will be sent out with a video. This process would help the district gain insight into what we consider important and necessary to maintain. Thank you.
I don't really have much more to add on to what Covenant said. It's so important that we have student feedback. We're the ones who are in the buildings all day, and we are the customers in this situation. And I think that it's really important that we have an opportunity to voice our opinions before the budget cuts are finalized. And we have a really great opportunity coming up. Check your emails. You'll see a video from Covenant and I, and it'll come with a budget engagement survey. Yes, thank you. It'll come with a survey, and it's really short, and you can just take it, and we will take your feedback into consideration when making these cuts. And I really hope that we have a lot of responses so that we can make the cuts in the best heart that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sullivan and Covenant. The next item on the agenda is somewhere. My computer's acting up. Is the department update. The teaching, learning, and equity update. John?
Yeah, today we have Ellen Wiesner, who is our Senior Director of Special Education, to give us a report on isolation and restraint. Isolation and restraint has been a hot topic across the state of Washington, and the rules and the laws have changed over time, so we want the board to, one, understand a little bit about that, and two, understand our stance on isolation restraint, give some rationale for that, and allow the board to ask some questions related to that.
Thanks. Everything ready?
Almost. Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to present in front of you. Not necessarily my favorite topic, but it is an important one to talk to. So this is a review update on restraint and isolation. And I'm referring to School Board Policy 3246 and the procedures for that. And what I want to start with is saying that restraint and isolation are prohibited practices. We need to remember that. They are prohibited practices except for when a student poses that their behavior is of imminent likelihood of serious harm. So I just want to give context to that. This is not something that we do frequently. It's something that we take very seriously. And just for reference, restraint is physical intervention or force used to control a student. Have a couple things, and what isolation refers to is when we restrict a student alone within a room or other form of enclosure for which the student may not leave. And when we do engage in restraint or isolation, there's some very specific notification and reporting requirements around that. So the first thing is it's verbal notification to the parent or guardian within 24 hours. really what we strive for is within the day. But it's 24 hours, and then that is followed up with written notification. And you can see there the list of things that we are required to report on. We need to talk to the incident, the type of restraint, isolation that was used, whether anybody was physically injured, and any recommendations for any change because of what happened. And then the third thing that comes to reporting is that annually we report to OSPI. So at the beginning of this month, January 1st, OSPI pulled data from our system that is all the incidences of restraint and isolation. That information, I do have some data for that, and I'll show it to you. I do want to preface it with that it is unofficial at this point. It's still being reviewed. There's a period of time where we are verifying those numbers to make sure that it is accurate, what was uploaded into the system. So here we go. This is what the last couple years have looked like in terms of restraint use in the district. You can see in 2021, I'm sorry, in the 2021 school year, we had a total number of 35 incidences of restraint that was used. In 21-22, we had 37. And in last school year, again, unofficial, 85 incidences. And this is the total number of incidences of restraint. So each time it's used, it's reported. So that doesn't mean that 35 students were restrained in 2021. It actually, in that year, there were 16 students that made up those 35 restraints. In 21-22, it was 26 students. And last school year, it was 55 of the 85. So there are some students that are restrained more than once. One of your questions might be, wow, that's a big increase. You went from the 30s all the ways up to 85. And there's kind of two theories that we have about why that increase happened. One, if you remember, in 2021 and even 21-22, we were not in school. The majority of our kids, we were doing virtual learning, remote learning. We did not have everyone in the school at that time. So that could be one thing that has contributed to those numbers. The other thing is that kind of between the 21-22 and last school year, there was a lot of work on clarifying our reporting requirements, as well as providing some clarity to what constitutes restraint. So we might have seen some more incidences last school year just because we were really working on making sure everybody was very clear about what constitutes a restraint and how that is reported. So it's those two things that we think are what led to an increase. What I'll say is I went back actually a little bit further in time, and I think it was the 1920 or the year before that, we were looking at 130 incidences of restraint. So it's concerning that where we are, at the same time, we're doing much better at preventing the use of restraint. Now, isolation, again, also unofficial for this last school year. So we have gone from 25 to 18, and last year we had 18 incidences of isolation. And for last year of that 18, again, that constitutes about 13 students. So there were a few students who were isolated more than once. And the number is 10 for both the 2021 and the 21-22 school year. So again, there are a few students who are isolated more than once. So just after looking at the data, there's just a couple of other points I wanted to bring up. These are things that we review with staff. These are things that we just consider. One is that restraint and isolation should not be used as a punishment. They are not forms of discipline. Again, it's about that imminent harm, danger of serious harm to self or others. And the other idea is that restraint and isolation is discontinued as soon as there is no more imminent harm. It's not so much about when a student is calm. Calm is a real subjective word. It's hard to know if they're truly calm. So we're looking at some of those behavioral cues that the danger has gone away. The other thing is, as before I mentioned, so it was 55 students that made up 85 restraints last year. So we do have students who are being restrained multiple times. We really want to make sure that in those situations, in particular, that we are reviewing, making sure why is there a pattern of this, making sure it's not us, making sure that we have the appropriate strategies in place, that we're doing things like functional behavior assessments. So we respond and debrief any incident that involves restraint, but we want to be particularly careful if we're seeing it continue. And then finally, we put a lot into talking about interventions, supports, strategies that we need to have in place in order to minimize and avoid any behavioral emergencies. So the whole idea, again, is about what can we do to prevent us even needing to put hands on a student or to isolate a student or to de-escalate a student. So that leads me, I wanted to make a comment about we talk a lot and about trauma, and a lot of this about our responses has to do with looking at it from a trauma-informed lens. Restraint and isolation are traumatizing for students and for staff, and traumatizing people who are already suffering from trauma can have life-altering effects. And another thing that we talk about is that, a lot comes up about why do we want to decrease the use of restraint? And it's about safety. Everybody is like, well, we got to be safe. We got to keep everybody safe. And the fact is, there really is no safe restraint. There is no safe restraint. We can do a number of things that will make things safer, but there is no safe restraint. So that then leads us to ways to eliminate the use of isolation and reduce the need for restraint. And the words eliminate the use of isolation are there is because there is a lot of attention both nationally and there's even legislation right now in our state that talks to eliminating the use of isolation. There is a lot of talk nationally and even in our state about reducing the need for restraint, but not necessarily the elimination of it. So it comes down to kind of three things that are recommendations for school districts to look at. One is crisis intervention programs, de-escalation training, and then evidence-based practices that look to reduce the physical restraint and elimination. And there was a work group in our state that came out with a report in 2022. The link is there if you can access it, but it's available online on the OSPI webpage. And so it comes down to those three things. So in terms of the crisis intervention program, I would say most districts have adopted a crisis intervention program. There's a few to choose from that the state recommends more than others. One of the recommendations is that that program has a trauma-informed approach. So going back to that it's about trauma. We want to be aware of that. And so our district for the last number of years have invested in training and using what's called UCARU. Now, let me stop for a second because there's a couple pronunciations of this. I was learned to say UCARU, and others say that, or you might hear UCARU. it's okay. They're fine with us using either one of them. But just so you know, if you hear me, I'm going to go to what I know and say yukaru. Yukaru is a Japanese word that means to receive, to accept. And so the idea is behavior is communication. So what is the message that that student is sending to us? What is that message that we need to receive and to accept and to respond to? It is it does not talk to restraint at all. Other crisis intervention programs do have a physical restraint piece. This one does not have that. It comes up with it's more about blocking than it is about restraint. It's more about coming back to that why. Why is a student engaging in this behavior? They're trying to communicate something, and what can we do in our response to understand what that is, and again, work on ways so that to build some new neural pathways is what they'll talk about. There's specific things that happen to the brain in trauma, so it's about teaching new ways to respond when you're upset about something, when something triggers you, or whatever that why might be. So I talked about it. So this approach, we look at understanding trauma, its effects on the brain and behavior. It's about what can we do to protect the student and others when they're becoming aggressive, as well as a really huge component of what can we do as adults to protect ourselves. Also understanding that many adults are also have trauma in their background, and everything that's going on can also affect them. In fact, as I'm mentioning trauma so much, the key thing here is that it talks about using a universal precaution when it comes to trauma. It's that assumption that you're likely working with a student or an adult that has some trauma, and that's what is coming out. So it's treating all as if all that we serve as if there's a possibility of trauma. I'd mentioned that the approach here is one more of comfort than control. So instead of using instead of restraining a student, we are working more to perhaps block. If a student is like hitting, kicking, using protective gear to block those actions. So you may see we have different sizes of blue mats, pads, the cushions. They're different sizes. Those are all used in various ways to reduce staff getting hurt and to work through a student's aggression. That is just a really quick summary of what that is. We have trained over 400 employees this year in Yukaru, and we have a training in August that all building administrators go through. We have it available to our staff throughout the year. There's an initial training that is 6 hours in length. And then every year there's a recertification, which is 3 hours. In addition to those formal trainings, we have about between like 10 and 15, I think, employees in our district who are trained to be trainers. And they deliver parts of this training, like the trauma-informed part and the de-escalation, at staff meetings. So it's worked into maybe an early release time. So buildings will request that training, and that's another way that we get out all these strategies. So over 400, did I say that? Yeah, so far this year, we still have a few more on the list to do. Also in that OSPI work group task force, they listed a number of classroom practices that were evidence-based and that they recommended that districts look at as a way to reduce the use of restraint and isolation. And this is kind of a progressive list. The first couple things that you'll see here are very universal. We want all students to have be taught and practice the use of self-regulation strategies, as well as having staff go through that as well, all the way going up to students and doing what we call functional behavior assessments, coming back to what's the why, what are the triggers of that student's aggression, and even to mental health support. So those are just kind of the list of things that we do in this district in various different ways. And that is my summary of how is that? Was that 10 minutes, 15? So are there any questions or comments, anything that I can answer?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned on page 5 that the total number of restraints is 85.
Yeah.
Is that special ed only, or is that?
Oh, you know what? That's a really good question. I forgot to mention that when we talk about restraint and isolation, is for all students. So this is not just special education students. Are there a higher percentage of students who are on IEPs who make up these numbers? Yes. But it is not just special education students.
Okay. Could we know what the ratio is, or?
You know what? In the old days, yes, they've changed how they do the reporting, and it's a little bit more tricky to get that information.
And I'll just ask, do you believe the neighborhood schools model is affecting this either way, or?
So the neighborhood schools model is about serving all students at their neighborhood schools, providing the continuum of services that they need at their neighborhood school. So there's nothing different necessarily that we have done that would result in terms of just looking at neighborhood schools and what that model means. That's not something that I could contribute to a rise or decrease of physical restraint and isolation.
It seems like with the neighborhood schools model, there maybe isn't enough classroom support for supporting these kids. And
so we have, what I'll say to that is that where we have some difficulty is in filling positions. So it's not, again, necessarily the model. It's where there are some difficulty is filling all positions. But there still is staff who do know how to respond. So I'm not sure what the relationship would be between the use of between the use of restraint and not having one position filled, or the number of staff there.
And on page 8, you mentioned about trauma, and I understand not wanting to traumatize further a student that's experiencing trauma. However, there has to be a trade-off, I guess, because I'm thinking back to September. Dawn Brother, mom of a first grader, shared that her daughter was in a first grade class and a student was experiencing trauma, seemed quite regularly, and her daughter was experiencing trauma from that. And there's got to be a trade-off. You just hate to see more trauma result from, a student going through that, and just kind of spreads.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think so. There's a lot of ways to approach that. What I want to just say that how it kind of connects back to my interpretation is just to talk to, I don't know if this is what you're implying, is should restraint or isolation have occurred with that student? And if that's what it is, what we have to be careful about is, again, going back to, this is a prohibited practice, except for in a situation of imminent harm. I don't know if that was a situation where that was where that constituted that.
Would trashing a school count as imminent harm, or trashing a schoolroom?
It depends.
Yeah, that's.
It depends.
We need to take some care not to go foul of the federal privacy laws with respect to students, and make sure that we discuss those in a more private circumstance. But in general, what I hear you saying is that with respect to restraint and isolation, the law hasn't changed, and the practice responding to the law has improved. It sounds like the reporting has improved.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, why the jump? So I think it is good to always have clarity. There always needs to be a reminder. It's that ongoing training in de-escalation techniques, ongoing training in reporting and what might constitute imminent harm. Yeah, so there's probably been some, I'm sorry, now I lost track of what the question was. Has there been increase in reporting?
The increase in the reporting is, at least in part, is what I'm hearing, is at least in part due to improved reporting.
Yes.
And
You clarified before that in 2019, 2020, it was 130.
Yeah.
And so then we had our pandemic years.
Yeah.
Less students in the buildings, and now we're back and we're at 85. So the number's gone down if you go back to normal. And then neighborhood schools started when?
Well, it depends what level. So secondary schools would have started, I believe before the pandemic. And then elementary has been a progression over the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
I want to just say a little bit in response to Director Wilson's concerns about our neighborhood schools model. I will say this, that in conversations with superintendents all across the state that haven't gone to the inclusive schools models, the way I refer to it, we're serving all of our students in an inclusive schools model. Everybody's experienced an increase in behavior and concerns with behavior, and having to deal with that, all of the things that we're dealing with. And in addition, it's the major contributor to the difficulty in managing the behavior of the students is the inability to hire staff to be able to perform the duties to support the students in the way that we have designed, whether that were in an inclusive schools model or in our old model where we were segregating and isolating students. And so that's the trade-off. We're no longer segregating and isolating students. We're giving them their free and appropriate education in a setting that is with their peers. And so that's the balance of the model there. And so we will continue to work to try to staff our buildings. It's not nearly as bad as it was in the middle of the pandemic. We're making strides, but we're still short. We'll have to continue to do that and work to support our staff. The training that we provide the staff is invaluable, and the folks that do go through the training learn some things about how to work with students, not just when to isolate and restrain, but how to avoid those getting to that point. We have some folks in our district that are using those strategies extremely effective, and it holds great promise for us if we can continue to get people trained. So appreciate the work that you want. We can come back and have a conversation about the inclusive schools model. I just didn't want to turn this into that in this moment, but happy to do that if that's a future topic that the board wants.
appreciate that. Do either of you have more questions, or the students have questions for?
I don't think I have any questions. I was on the point that Jackie was making about the 1920 school year and how really this year with the 85, it's similar, probably towards the end of the year will probably be similar numbers to that year. I also think, and maybe Director Fowler knows this, but high school feels like they've been in the same model for a long time, and it was just elementary within the last 2 school years.
Yeah, and
that
you know
we
what,
moved.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm
you're
just
fine.
now thinking too, I believe the year that the district started to adopt the UCARU model was
It was like
maybe the 18-19 school year?
It
was
felt like
in
it because I
there.
remember us having
So-
information. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that there perhaps is some evidence that that is effective and it's doing what it needs to do. All right.
Any others?
Anything else?
Do, when our staff signs up for this 6-hour training, do they get clock hours?
Yeah. Yes.
It's good to know. Appreciate,
Oh, yes.
I guess, surfacing that fact, that you can get your clock hours by learning how to take care of kids better. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you.
And so, the next item on our agenda is the Good News Report.
Hello, Superintendent Boyd. Hello, Board of Directors. Thank you. Pop up here. I'm going to start off with something good about our snow situation. I know it doesn't sound like there's anything good, but I will say that on Friday, went around and got some pictures of some of our staff. Our custodial maintenance facility staff obviously worked really hard during the weather, and we posted these pictures on Facebook, and the reaction was really heartwarming. Over 1,200 likes on Facebook and over 100 comments on Facebook alone. And it was just great to see them recognized. And so many of the people that responded were other staff members too, and just showing their appreciation for how much work they did. The situation with the ice, like John had mentioned, that for our buses, it's also harder to shovel and to get ice off than it is snow. So I thought that was great to see them recognized. Evergreen High School signing day for athletics. It's changed a lot over the years, so there are multiple days, but a wonderful event at Evergreen. 2 of their football players signed 4-year scholarships to play Division I football, including All-American Fox Crater, who's going to go to the University of Oregon, so he's going to go across the bridge. And then Arthur Ban is going to go to San Diego State University, and that's awesome. I think it's also really great that their GPAs are both over 3.5. So these are true student athletes that were celebrated. A really great event at Evergreen High School, and a lot of people out there to celebrate them. Our MLK, our Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations at our schools, unfortunately, were disrupted a lot because of the weather. Cascade Middle School had theirs held not last Friday, but the Friday before. And I put this here because we called a 2-hour early release. And instead of canceling, they do what our staff and students do so well, they pivoted. And instead of they couldn't get the whole school into the assembly, so they figured out a way in that short period of time to do this remotely. So that's why you see students and staff talking and performing in the library. So they still got it out as an all-staff Zoom assembly. So we did learn some things during the pandemic that are still working in our schools today. I want to talk about a couple great science lessons that went on in our elementary schools. At Hartford Elementary School, 4th graders had a Zoom meeting and lesson with a journalist who documents volcanic eruptions in Iceland, which, as people know, it's been pretty busy. And this is Bjorn Stenbeck. And I just want to, when I say that he has covered these eruptions, this is from his Instagram page. And these are the kind of things that the students were able to talk and learn. And some of these are videos. Really amazing how the access that he was able to get. He taught some of the students there how he uses cameras. Now my brain's not working. The things that fly.
The drones?
Drones, thank you. Drones that he uses
one time because they don't come back, but he's able to record that video. So it was just a really good lesson for these fourth graders to ask these questions from a person who was able to show, and it was happening. I mean, I think they organized this before the eruptions then happened in Iceland right around that same time. Burnt Bridge Creek, they held a space assembly for their students where they got people from the Pacific Science Center come out and demonstrate some really cool concepts, and they had experiments and props for the assembly, and then all the students went back to their classroom and they did individual labs based on science. So a really great school-wide day of space. And then finally, I wanted to talk about a music thing. The Mountain View High School does this every year. They host a Jolly Jamboree concert. And what they do is they invite other schools to come and listen to their wonderful performers. All their bands are, I don't know the names of all their bands, and Sullivan left, but multiple bands throughout the entire gym. And they each kind of perform. And this year, Hollingsworth Academy, Illahee, Sifton Elementary School, and Riverview Elementary School were the guests for this performance. And it's really cool to see the younger kids see the older kids perform. And I think it's a way for them to say, oh, wait, I want to do that. That's really cool. So, and this happens right before the holidays. So that is my report. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
Greg, I just want to comment that it's just a reminder of all the amazing things that are going on in our schools. I have the privilege of being able to go into our schools multiple times a month. And thank you for bringing forward all the positive things that are happening. There's just, this is just an absolute tiny slice of all the amazing things. So appreciate the work of your staff, keeping this in the front of us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Agreed. Okay. The next item on our agenda is board comments. And I want to point out that this would be a good time, if you have suggestions for future agenda items, to include them in your comments here. Who wants to go first?
I'm looking forward to this weekend and the Ledge Conference and then the Day on the Hill. And hopefully we can have some productive work up there and have some meetings.
Really looking forward to that. Jackie, do you have anything?
I wanted to thank the community members who have written and commented on diversifying our staff and making that a priority and an effort. That's something that is important to me. When I was at the Student Advisory Committee meeting right before our last meeting, the students talked about that, how important it was to them, and that's why Sullivan came out and talked about it again. And so this is something that the students want. It's something that's good for everyone, and I want people to keep thinking about it. I also want to say thank you to the maintenance staff for making the building safe for students and teachers and everyone to go back to. That's a hard job. It was hard just shoveling my house and our building. We have so much property and grounds, and it's a huge job, so thank you.
Those maintenance and custodial staff are up really early, driving on dicey roads to get to the building so
And
that we can be safe. And transportation
Going
as
out
well.
there early in the morning.
They're driving buses around just to make sure that they can safely do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for commenting tonight, the public comments, and for last month or earlier this month as well. And I'll just preface my comments earlier were concerns just I've heard shared by multiple teachers and parents this past year. Just want to share their concerns as well. So thank you.
Thank you. As John mentioned, we had the budget feedback meetings on Zoom. Didn't have to cancel those because of the ice, and received a lot of substantive questions that staff are now going over to identify themes. We'll talk about that further on, but I just really appreciate the time that was taken to open that space, and that you're remembering some groups that might have been left out. So thank you for that. I want to recommend to everybody that in connection with a couple of things, I live about 800 feet from an elementary school, and so I decided to offer my time to volunteer in the library. And it gives you such a perspective to be in the school that I just encourage everybody who can to spend some time in the school and volunteer with the great teachers and and other leaders and support staff that we find there. It's a thing that can change your life. And I got to see just how excellent the library collections are at Emerald Elementary. I appreciate the staff there opening space for me to come and volunteer. Nothing else. I'm also really looking forward to the advocacy opportunities that we have on Sunday and Monday coming up, and hope we can be persuasive and get that done too.
I'd like to do some of those volunteering as well.
Yeah. Any other comments? Hearing none, we will call a recess for the meeting and reconvene in a little while for our board workshop, which will consist of a discussion about budget engagement, as well as some legislative updates. After which, we will go into executive session for approximately 1 hour to review the performance of a public employee. And we'll adjourn the meeting after that point. Thank you all for coming.